Thank you for coming to my live stream. If you don't know me, my name is Daryl Fairweather. I am the chief economist at Redfin. I'm also author of a book, Hate the Game: Economic Cheat Codes for Life, Love, and Work, from the University of Chicago Press. And every week on Thursdays at 3 Eastern, I talk about the latest housing data straight from the presses of Redfin News. I talk about what's going on in the housing market, what's going on in the economy. If you have any questions, comments, please put them in the chat. Please like whatever live stream you are watching right now. Share it, repost it, get the word out. Let's get a good conversation going. But first, let's talk about the latest housing market data. So, the news this week is that new listings are increasing. Sellers are starting to sell. And this is good news because for the last 4 years, since mortgage rates went up at the fastest pace on record, homeowners have not been wanting to sell. This is because of the mortgage rate lock-in effect. If you own a home right now, chances are you have a rate below 4%, at least below 5%. It's only if you bought in the last couple of years would you have a rate above 5 or 6% for a 30-year fixed rate. And what that means is that most homeowners would have to give up a very cheap mortgage in order to sell their home. And if they were to buy again, they'd be buying at very high interest rates. But it's been a long time. It's been like 4 years now since interest rates went up. Sellers have been waiting for mortgage rates to drop or to attract more buyers so they could get better prices, but also if they're going to buy again, to buy at a lower rate. And it hasn't happened. And I think the longer that we go on without it happening, the more people accept that this is the new reality: higher mortgage rates. We're not getting back to 3% rates unless there was some sort of catastrophe. So sellers are coming back. They are listing their homes. It's kind of awkward timing because it is the end of August. Usually when sellers decide to sell, they sell in spring so that they have their home on the market for all of summer, which is when most moves happen. The housing market is kind of seasonal because most people want to move when the weather is nice, when their kids are out of school. So end of summer to see this uptick in listings, it's a little weird. Okay, but let's talk about what's happening on the buy side. The upswing in new listings comes as home buying demand slows. Pending home sales fell 1.3% week over week compared to that 1.2% increase in new listings, which is they fell to their lowest level since March, and this is seasonally adjusted. So just as soon as sellers decide, like, I'm tired of waiting, I'm just going to sell, buyers are backing off. And they're backing off because, like we talked about, mortgage rates are high. And let me pause for a second and see what's going on over in my chats. I'm getting some hearts, I think. All right. Well, you got anything to say? Put it in the chat. And like this, share it, do your thing, subscribe. Okay, but let's keep talking about the housing market. So mortgage rates are up. The weekly average mortgage rate is 6.67%, which is quite high, but pretty consistent with where things have been for the last couple of years. Actually, it's just shy of the highest level in 13 months. So it's in the range of where things have been for the last few years, but it's on the higher end. And as soon as mortgage rates go up, it becomes less affordable for buyers to buy because they're paying more interest in order to get the loan, and they can afford lower prices when interest rates go up. So buyers are backing off. That's normal. And it's just happening at a time when new listings are increasing. And what this tells me, increase in supply, decrease in demand, prices are going to have to come down. If not in nominal terms, at least in inflation adjusted terms, which has actually already been happening. So prices on the median priced home are only up 1.8%, whereas inflation is more like 2 to 3%. So in real terms, prices are coming down, and this is probably going to continue. You might be looking at price growth of closer to 1%, 0%, possible negative. Median asking prices went negative 0.1%. Very, very small decline, but still a decline nonetheless. And an indication that sellers are getting more motivated. No more waiting on the sidelines, or at least it seems like that tide is turning. Now they are listing their homes. They're listing them for more reasonable prices. And that's probably going to continue given this data. So that's where we're at. Let's see what's going on more locally, because real estate is always local. I'll talk about this later, but Seattle had the largest decline in prices, followed by Austin. They're building a lot more supply there all across Texas. When you build, prices come down. That's what Texas teaches us. San Francisco has had strong price growth. West Palm Beach, it's a community that is mostly supported by wealthy older people. Wealthy older people still doing good in this economy. And also West Palm Beach values fell a couple of years ago, so they're kind of recovering right now. In terms of sales, sales very bad in Seattle. I'll talk about that later. Also bad in San Diego. And prices or pending sales are still going up. Florida, San Francisco. The Midwest, it used to be at the top of the list for sales and price, but now we're not seeing like this dominance of Midwest. There's still Milwaukee up here for price increases, still Cincinnati for sales increases, in St. Louis. But I think prices have even gotten too high in the Midwest. There was a while where the Midwest was looking pretty strong in terms of demand and price growth and sales, because it was still relatively affordable compared to the rest of the country. People on a middle class salary could still afford to buy homes. But as prices go up and up and up, that starts being less true. So I think the price growth is subsiding and the sales growth is subsiding until things adjust. All right, well, okay, hey, we got a comment. I really want to know podcast says, "What's good, sis? I hope you're well. I'm really enjoying your book. Yay! Got a plug for the book. I'm glad you like it. How much will the bond market news affect housing?" Great segue, because I was just about to talk about that. Oh, wait, was I going to talk about this first? I can skip over to the bond market. All right. So lots to talk about with the bond market. The US Treasury has had to intervene to lower long-term bond yields because of how much volatility is happening in international bond markets. And in very simplistic terms, what's basically happening is that investors are becoming concerned. There's a lot to be concerned about, but sometimes investors, they all just wake up one morning and are like, I don't like where things are headed. And that happened over the last few days. And I'm going to put it into this framework that I always put it into when I talk about what economic era we're in. Investors woke up a couple of days ago and said, things could get bad. This is my everything's bad quadrant, where we have high inflation and low growth, resulting in, some upward pressure on interest rates. So what's bad that investors are getting scared about? Well, they're getting scared about breakdowns in global cooperation. I'm kind of lumping real wars and trade wars into this because I feel like they have the same effect, which is that global cooperation goes down. We're not trading with other countries. We have tariffs, we have aggression, and that means that globally, economic growth is going to slow down. When countries cooperate with one another, we're able to increase global economic output. And when they're not cooperating with each other as much, global economic output goes down. And this results in higher inflation and lower growth, something that economists call stagflation. So investors are worried about the war in Iran. And I think just like the possibility of more conflicts like this, whether they are military conflicts or economic conflicts. They're also very worried about debt. So the US debt just keeps getting bigger. And the bigger it gets, the more investors get worried about our ability to pay down our debt, especially 30 years from now. That's why you see a lot more volatility in the very long-term rates. There's a lot of volatility there because nobody really knows the world is going to be like 30 years from now. So anytime there's like bad vibes, those longer duration yields tend to get impacted more. But yeah, debt is a concern, a lingering concern. And it's not just the debt. If the United States was seen as a competent country with a bright future ahead of ourselves, then investors would feel like, okay, you got a big debt, but you're on track to pay it off. No problem if you're going to pay it off. If anything, I'm going to buy more debt because I am so, confident in your ability to pay it off. So on the one hand, you have a growing debt, and on the other hand, you have, I think, less faith in the US government's ability to manage its finances, unfortunately. So that's why we're seeing a lot of volatility. It's not just the United States. Globally, like the issues of global cooperation, this hurts countries besides the US more than it hurts the US. Like if you're a little country, and you're being impacted by the Strait of Hormuz, like if you're Bangladesh, I'm not saying, is Bangladesh little? They're a huge population. Anyway, if you're like Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, it's a very big deal that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And if there are more shocks like this, more countries are going to be in a very tough situation. But that does end up putting the US in a tougher situation, because when global bond yields increase, investors get better returns going globally and outside the United States. So in order for the US to keep attracting investors, they have to increase their yields in order to compete globally. So even stuff that happens in these other countries, it impacts our ability to issue bonds. So what happened was that the Treasury, they intervened in markets and the longer duration bonds, and they did buybacks. Yeah, 40 trillion on Wednesday, which is kind of unprecedented. A little bit of precedent in the Biden administration with Janet Yellen, but they're taking it further. And I think the reason this is surprising is because, at least it's not clear to me what this really accomplished. Mortgage rates didn't move. I mean, they moved a little bit, but they came right back up. So it didn't, for the thing that I think everybody focuses on, mortgage rates, because it's something very tangible to people in the United States, whether their mortgage rates goes up or down, like literally determines whether somebody's able to buy a home or not at a certain price. So for the US Treasury to do all of this and for it to not show up in mortgage rates, I don't know like what the point was. 30-year bond yields, they were impacted, but like regular people don't buy 30-year bonds. At least I don't. Say in the chat, do you buy 30-year bonds? I feel like it's mostly corporations that have these much longer time scales where, like, if you're IBM, you need to worry about your 30-year outlook in a way that's different than an individual who has, a limited lifespan. So I don't think regular people are really impacted by this unprecedented measure that the US Treasury took. So if regular people aren't impacted, like what was the point? I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that there was like an imminent danger happening. If there was actually an imminent danger, the Fed would have done something. What's kind of unprecedented about what happened is that the Treasury took on this function of stabilizing markets when that is more the Fed's role. I mean, I guess obviously there's some ambiguity over who does what here, and it's not just Bessent who did this. Yellen did it too. So, it's not unprecedented for the Treasury to intervene this way. It just, when there's an emergency, the Fed can act really quickly. So since the Fed didn't act, I'm skeptical that there was a real emergency here. And then I'm back to the question of like, what was the point of this? What was the point? I really want to know pod says never bought a 30-year. Yeah. I don't know anybody who's bought a 30-year bond. Let's go over to TikTok and see what comments we got. Keep protecting that yen. Eventually it won't be enough. I'm glad that you brought up the yen and international currencies. Part of this is like, I think the US Treasury thinks about things in a more diplomatic way than I think the Fed does. I think so. I think that's right. So it's possible that the reason they did this was for diplomatic reasons. Nothing to do with the housing market, which is my area of expertise in US economic, like how the US economy is doing. So if it was for international diplomacy reasons, I would then it makes sense that I don't understand why they did it, because it was for reasons that I don't understand. But another thing that I wanted to bring up is that this kind of heavy-handedness in markets is something that China does, and it's something that the US is more allergic to, right? Free market US. So it's also, I think, just interesting that the US Treasury is moving in this direction. I feel like in a lot of ways, I don't know if this is a controversial take or not. I feel like in a lot of ways, we're like getting closer to the way China does things. I went to China in 2016 on a work trip when I was working for Amazon. And that was it made this really big impression on me because like at the time it was a culture shock going to China, you know, they do things differently. You know, when you're there, you're being surveilled, right? Not that different from the United States nowadays. China intervenes and in private companies, the US is starting to do more of that. So maybe this is another sign that like we're getting closer to China. And I'm not trying to really make any claims whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. You know, I'm sure China does stuff that's well, I'm not making any claims about that. Just an observation. Just an observation that things that the United States previously would have thought of as foreign to us, not so foreign anymore. Yeah, US made direct investments in Intel, says Philip Koshy over on TikTok. Another good example. Is there like I feel like there should be a catchy phrase for this, the Chinafication. That sounds, I don't like that. If anybody's got a good idea for like how to talk about the US economy getting closer to the Chinese economy, I love a good portmanteau. Put it in the chat. Okay, let's see else. I'm Sri. Yeah, that's another good one. Okay, I mean not a good one. That's another bad thing that puts us in the worrisome category. I have climate change here. That brings us into this everything's bad quadrant where we have low economic growth and high inflation. Super El Nino coming, which as this follower in the chat, where was his name? Hansy, or her name, Hansy, I'm not sure, their name, Hansy, pointed out that climate change is going to impact global economies. Or not Super El Nino. Let's focus on Super El Nino. Super El Nino coming up could be a very disruptive event for global economies. And it's not just that we're going to have it this year, because of climate change, there's a possibility there'll be more of these cataclysmic events in the future, which is scary. It's scary to me personally, and I get why it's scary to investors. I get why it's scary for the bond market. Now, maybe tomorrow or next week, the bond market will wake up and be like, hey, I'm feeling good about things, you know? AI is coming, or AI is here. You know, we're getting closer and closer to our urbanist dreams. At least I think we're getting closer. If you follow the YIMBY movement, maybe you think we're getting closer to urbanist paradise. And maybe we'll get some major breakthrough in technology. I have energy technology here, but just yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, big news about mRNA vaccines treating cancer. I don't know where that would go in this. Where would that go? It would increase the population. So it's actually probably more in the orange category, just people living longer. But anyway, my point is that this week the markets were pessimistic. Next week they might be optimistic. There are lots of long-term trends going on that can pull us in these different economic directions. And there's definitely a lot of reasons to be pessimistic, but there's reasons for optimism too. Chinaification of our government's activity. Yeah, Chinaification. That sounds better than Chinafication. Is that the Latin root? Anyway, that was BL in the YouTube chat. Sorry, I'm just like reading things without context. It sounds like I'm just saying random stuff. Okay. Oh wait, so yeah, I'm still talking about the bonds. Oh, I saw this GIF on Blue Sky that I think pretty perfectly encapsulates what happened with this bond buyback, because it didn't do anything. Like I said, it didn't do anything meaningfully for American consumers. It is like squirting the water gun at the wildfire. Maybe it's a show that you're trying. Maybe there's international diplomacy reasons I don't understand. But I thought this was funny. Okay, what else did I want to talk about? Okay, yeah, other big economic news from the New York Times. Walmart posted its slowest sales growth in years as Americans tighten wallets. And this is one of a couple of stories I've seen about US consumers starting to feel the pinch of inflation, of stagnant wage growth, of high interest rates. All of those things combined make Americans poorer. And for a while, the economy was really strong amidst all of these factors. Oh, also, a sluggish job market. That's another one that makes Americans poorer. All of these factors combined are making Americans poorer, but it wasn't showing up in consumer spending. But now there are signs that it is impacting consumer spending. And this is important because when Americans stop spending money, that's when we enter into a recession. Consumption arguably the most important component of GDP. We have all of this investment in the economy coming from AI. That's another component in GDP, but the consumer spending part, if you don't have consumer spending, your economy is not growing. So Walmart posting its slowest sales growth in years is a sign that consumer spending could be in jeopardy. Another story from CBS News, Americans' paychecks are getting swallowed by rent. Sky-high rental costs across the U.S. are swallowing up a large share of Americans' paychecks. Why have rents spiked? Well, it's the housing shortage, especially in high-cost areas like Los Angeles, San Francisco, Boston, Washington, D.C. For a while, rents were stable, but it looks like rents are starting to accelerate, which is predictable. When it is more affordable to rent than it is to buy a home, those things converge because the people who would have otherwise rented, or would have otherwise bought a home, they decide to rent. There's more demand for rentals. More demand means higher prices, rents go up. Also, fewer people buying those homes means that home prices go down, as we talked about before. Home price growth slows. And the affordability for buying versus renting, in the long run, those things should converge. So it is not surprising at all to me that rents are starting to go up. Dr. April Barrage, what's up, April? Says the Bay Area is crazy. Oh, yeah. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the San Francisco housing market is in its own world because of AI. Talk about it in a little bit. I really want to know. Pod says the top 20% of earners is responsible for 60% of spending. I'll have to verify that fact. I don't know if that's precisely right, but tell rich people to keep spending, LOL. Well, the problem is that well, no, I don't think it's a problem. Rich people are spending. The housing market is actually very much supported by luxury buyers right now. It's one of the strongest parts of the housing market is the luxury market. If you have enough money that you can buy things all cash, like a little bit of inflation doesn't hurt you. But the American economy, it's like this Walmart spending. That's what runs it. So I'll have to go look up what percent of spending is done by each group of people. But typically, like in terms of proportion, like the proportion of your earnings that you spend, poorer people spend all of their money. Rich people save a large portion of their money. So that allows them to kind of ride out these types of bumps in the economy. But they're not going to save us from a recession. Okay, what else are they going to talk about? Oh yeah. Another thing that is, incredibly unaffordable is childcare. Housing and childcare consume more than half of the typical U.S. family's income, but the costs vary widely by metro. And let's see these metro differences because it is so crazy. I'm going to start with the most expensive first. So in Los Angeles, the typical family would have to spend 97% of their income on childcare and housing. So they would have 3% of their income left over after paying for childcare and their housing. Now you probably be thinking like, well, how does that even work? Like how do families even exist in Los Angeles? Well, they're not able to afford these basic needs. I mean, if you owned your home for a long time and bought a very long time ago, then you're not concerned with current housing costs. But if you are, a family of four trying to buy a house in LA and send your kids to childcare, unless you are significantly above the median income, you will not be able to do that. You're going to have to make a sacrifice somewhere. You'll have to rent instead of own. Maybe rent a one-bedroom apartment instead of own it. Maybe you'll have to get assistance, go into low-income housing in order to even afford housing. And when it comes to childcare, you're not going to be able to afford childcare. If you're a two-parent household, one parent's going to have to stay home with the kids, or you'll have to get family to help with you, or you'll have to apply for subsidized childcare like getting in touch with a nonprofit. People are not able to make it work in the free market in Los Angeles at the prevailing housing costs, childcare costs, and incomes. So in a fundamental way, like the Los Angeles economy is not working. The only way the economy works is because of these extra market interventions, tactics that people have to use. The free market in Los Angeles is not at all working for families. And if it's not working for families, it's not working for the economy, because you need families to have kids to create the next generation. So we really got to bring down these housing costs, at the very least. Childcare, I'm not a childcare economist. I don't know if that's the right word. I'm not who are the economists who study childcare? Is there a word for that? Let me know in the chat. It's not labor. Maybe it's labor. Anyway, I'm on a tangent. Los Angeles economy is not working in a free market sense. I really want to know. Pod says, I was paying $400 a week in LA on childcare. That was in 2012. Yeah, it's going to be more like $3,000 a week for an infant in Los Angeles. Wait, what does it say here? Median annual childcare cost. Okay, maybe not that extreme. 22,000. All right, it's going to be more like nearly 2,000 a month for childcare. Dr. April Barrage says that is one reason post-COVID some women left the workforce. It was cheaper for one parent to stay at home and watch the children, and people realized a paycheck was paying for childcare. Yes. And if you're on TikTok, you've probably seen all of the content lately about like trad wife versus working woman mother. And I think that this social debate, the reason why it's become so contentious and it's exploded so much, is because of this tension. Like, women have to choose between their careers and their ability to make sure that their child is getting proper care. I say women, I mean, men could be making this choice too, but I think the choice predominantly falls on women. And I think that like the affordability of it all is why I think it's getting so contentious, because people aren't actually able to choose the thing that they would most want to do. They're economically being forced into situations that are not ideal for them because of the costs. BL on YouTube says, I think childcare would be labor economy. That's my guess. I think it's the labor economists who are studying childcare. Maybe it's health. I know there are health economists too. They probably study different elements of it. I think Emily Oster, who's probably the most child rearing economist I can think of, started off as labor and health. All right, let's go look at some more comments. Bloop Blop on TikTok is saying that we used to be pro free trade, but now we're banning Chinese LLM usage. Yeah, breakdown in global trade happening. Not good for global economic growth. Running Not Fleeing said, call it Chinesey. I don't think that's right. FMX Man 1564 on Instagram says, will we see a politician run in paying off our debt for real, not just talk? Can anyone really win on that? I think that every politician in some ways is running on improving the economy. And like I was saying before, where'd my little visual go? Oh, here we go. There's two ways to address the debt problem. You reduce government spending, or you increase the tax base. And increasing the tax base is equivalent to saying we grow the economy. So I think every politician, even the DSA candidates, they are running on ways to grow the economy. People on the left are more concerned with strengthening the social safety net, because their argument is that if people are bogged down with things like healthcare costs, housing costs, all the costs, they are not able to contribute to the economy. They're like stuck in this position where like nothing is working and they can't get out. So creating a stronger social safety net, to some people, when they hear that, they hear you're growing the debt. When other people hear that, they hear you are providing a foundation for the economy to grow. And people on different sides of the political spectrum are going to interpret that differently. I think everybody is skeptical of the government's ability to actually grow the economy. A lot of people say they're going to do it and it doesn't happen. So, but I think that's like what every politician runs on. They're running on, giving people jobs and growing the economy, because Growing the economy creates jobs. Okay. Fogglesworth says, any opinions on single stair building code reform to increase housing construction? My opinion is let's do it. I think we should be addressing any and all ways to streamline permitting housing construction in safe ways, but I think there's enough evidence now that single stair is not safer, or double stair is not safer than single stair in terms of fire safety, right? So we should just do it. All right, what else was I going to talk about? Did I go through all this stuff? Da, 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 da. Oh, yeah, here's another sign that people, well, this is a fake sign. There's a lot of chatter on social media about foreclosures and how foreclosures are on the rise, but it's a little bit of fake news. And this article by Logan Mohtashami is why 2026 foreclosure gains are not a housing crash signal. It has this nice little chart that zooms out, okay? And you can see that, yes, foreclosures have been increasing since the pandemic, but they are still below pre-pandemic levels, and they are still nowhere near 2005, 2004 even levels. Foreclosures are much more rare now. And the reason why that is that post-foreclosure crisis, we raised the standards for who gets a mortgage. No more subprime, just prime. So the people who have mortgage debt now are well off. They have great credit scores. They have lots of equity in their homes because of how much home values increased during the pandemic and even before the pandemic. They're older. They're not the kinds of people who fall into foreclosure. So even though foreclosures are becoming a little bit more frequent, it's kind of just a reversion to the mean, and not even a reversion to the mean, a reversion to like a new lower normal. I mean, we should keep paying attention to it. The fact that they're increasing is a sign of a weakening economy, the same way that Walmart's sales growth being slow, it's not negative, slow is also a worrying sign for the economy. Like yellow lights, not red lights, if that makes sense. So don't believe the hype on foreclosures. It's not that bad. Remember the sequestering of the 2010s when we cut a bunch of spending? It was horrible and prolonged how long it took to pull out of the Great Recession, says BL. Yeah. I mean, that's why we went so big with pandemic recession stimulus, is because we went too low in 2008. And now we're like, oh, we did too big during the pandemic. Now we have inflation, and now we're getting really hawkish on inflation. So it's always like, we're honing in on the right economic policy. We never get it quite right because we're fallible as economists, but we are getting better. Just like, I feel like people take for granted how, I don't know what visual to have. Maybe I'll put this up. I feel like people take for granted the fact that like we don't have Great Depressions. We don't have like back before the Fed was created, we would have economic crises on the regular, and that doesn't happen anymore. And the pandemic recession was so short, just came and went. We got rid of it. So we're getting better, like technologically, and I would put this even in this green category, at monetary policy, because us economists, we're getting smarter. We're not perfect, far from it, but I think that like we're getting smarter at managing the economy. So that's a reason to be optimistic. Let's see what other chats we got going on. Okay. Oh, so economist drama, and I'm sorry if this is not interesting to the non-economists. I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't neg myself. Okay. There was this big, let's pull this out of my head. Okay. I should be reconnected now. My mic pack. Okay, you should be able to hear me now. I don't know what the heck happened. I like broke my mic pack, but thank you for bearing with me. Thank you. Yeah, it's back. Audio's back. Okay. Right in time for me to talk about this drama. Wait, can you not? Okay. People are still saying they can't hear me, but I'm pretty sure the audio is back. Pretty sure it's back. All right, cool. Oh, right. Okay, so what happened was, let me recap the drama. So The Economist, everybody knows The Economist, famous magazine. Lots of people all around the world read it to get their economic news. They published this article titled "The World's Most Influential Economist is Oddly Unconvincing. Daron Acemoglu is revered. Why? Question mark. Background. Daron Acemoglu is like one of the most beloved economists of all time, to the point where he's like become memeified in the profession. People make jokes about how he had about like these like the those Chuck Norris memes where it's like Chuck Norris could like do anything. Anyway, he's that guy for economics. People make memes about how many articles he publishes and how many citations he gets, and he's also a Nobel Prize winner. So he is, and he's also just a really nice guy. Can you still not hear? Someone tell me if you can hear me or not. Oh, it is back. Okay, thank you. I think I just have a delay for the comments. Anyway, so Daron Acemoglu is a very revered economist in terms of his output, the fact that he has a Nobel Prize, the fact that he's like the most cited economist of all time, really, maybe beyond most cited living economist. And he's also just like a really nice guy. I went to MIT. He was my professor when I was at MIT for a course on network economics. And I just have this really vivid memory meeting with him at office hours and having a one-on-one meeting with him. And he was just like the nicest guy. He was so encouraging. And, economists are often cold and discouraging. So it really stuck in my mind how just warm he was. And I think he's the wrong guy to go after because there was this whole debate on all the social media channels that economists hang out on, like Blue Sky and Twitter, about like why was this article published? Why did The Economist feel like they had to call out Daron Acemoglu? And important background here. Okay, so one explanation for why they did this. This is like, to me, the equivalent of like Rolling Stone publishing an article called "Is Beyonce Overrated?" If Rolling Stone were to have a cover story, "Is Beyonce Overrated?" people would buy that magazine, right? Because it's just so sensational and it's going to stir up drama. And if that was the point of it, they succeeded. They got clicks. There was a lot of rage. Maybe it was just rage bait. But as some economists were pointing out, including myself, like maybe there was a deeper motivation here, because Daron has been lately very critical of artificial intelligence, especially the way that artificial intelligence is a potential accelerant of wealth inequality. Okay, so The Economist lately has been, I would say, skeptical of arguments about wealth inequality. They did this article a couple of weeks ago, really criticizing Gen Z for turning to socialism. But really, like what they were talking about were things that were very basic, like wanting universal healthcare, not necessarily like full-on socialism. So, I mean, people have been pointing out that The Economist perhaps has gone in a more biased direction. Let's put it that way. I just wanted to bring up this article. But, what was the last, let's talk about what's the last thing that Daron Acemoglu published. It was this NBER working paper called Automation and Repression, in which he spells out that artificial intelligence increases the risk of a revolt from the working class, and it increases the likelihood of undemocratic institutions suppressing that working class. This is, I mean, it sounds like something Marx would write, right? But this is Daron Acemoglu, one of the most revered and beloved economists,
putting out this research paper. It's theoretical. It's a game theory model, modeled as a global game. We consider a model of automation embedded in a political environment where workers can undertake a revolt, and a greater inequality between capital and labor caused by AI increases the likelihood of a revolt. Decentralized automation decisions raise the share of capital in national income and increase the likelihood of a successful revolt. A capitalist state prefers to regulate the level of automation to lessen that revolt, but they can also, they can also, unless the threat of revolt is quite weak and the capitalist state stock is quite low, the capitalist state prefers repression. So this very influential, prominent economist put out this paper basically saying like, hey, if we don't regulate AI to create more opportunities for workers, to make workers better off, the workers might throw a global revolt and the people in power are going to react by taking away their rights. I mean, it's such a, like, I kept saying out loud, it's like, whoa, this is like, this is some serious stuff. Shots fired, right? So people are questioning the timing of this Economist article. Like, why are they singling him out in this very unconvincing way? You can go read the article. They make very unconvincing, arguments as to why Daron is overrated. And what I think, it's okay to question any economist for being overrated. Even Beyonce, I understand why some people might think that Beyonce is overrated, right? Because does she really deserve this extreme level of success? And one of the things that I learned from Daron Acemoglu in my class on network economics is that this is a feature of stardom. It was even one of the papers that we talked with, the research that we discussed even talked about how in research, papers that get more cited have exponential growth, because the more citations a paper has, the more people read it and the more people will cite it, and it just builds and builds and builds. It's the same thing with in physics with the star. Like, the bigger a star gets, the bigger it will continue to get, because it creates its own gravity that attracts more matter that makes the star even bigger. So I think even Daron Acemoglu would have agreed with an article that was questioning the meritocracy of academia, maybe arguing that there needs to be more policy intervention in publishing, in academia, to make sure that superstars don't get unjustifiably big. But that's not what this article was about. This article was just like, hey, this is what I tweeted this. This is basically what the article did. The Economist piece reads like the scene from The Office where they are debating whether Hilary Swank is hot or not. That's what it felt like. Like, just like, obviously Hilary Swank is a beautiful woman. She's a movie star. Why is this a debate? It's like the same thing with Daron, but maybe even on a more ridiculous scale. Why are we singling this guy out, asking if he's washed or not, or if he's overrated or not? Why him? Why him? And maybe it's just for the clicks, because he's so beloved. It is like attacking Beyonce. Of course, it's going to stir up a lot of attention. But some people are questioning whether it had anything to do with this working paper. I mean, this working paper is a theory paper. Like, the Economist was criticizing his research for not following like the most rigorous empirical standards, but this paper is just a theory paper. Acemoglu, for the most part, I think of him more as a theorist than an empiricist. So it's also kind of weird to go after him for that. And they're also not holding the same standard to other economists. Like, Tyler Cohen is quoted in this article. Tyler Cohen, he doesn't hold the same empirical standard. He doesn't put all of his arguments through a rigorous empirical standard. When you're publishing something in an economics journal versus saying something to a journalist who asks you what you think of something, those are two different standards. And it's kind of ridiculous for the Economist to be like, everything he says isn't backed up by rigorous empirical research. It's like, no, nobody is. Nobody does that. So what's going on there? Let's see if anybody cares. Anybody commenting? What do you think? Are you pro Daron Acemoglu? Do you think he's washed? Do you think he's overrated? I don't think so. Someone says he is overrated, but carry on. Okay. And again, I'm not saying that he's not overrated, but why not talk about Paul Krugman? Why not talk about Tyler Cohen? Why not talk about all the other economists that people think are potentially overrated? It just feels weird to single him out. Yeah, seems like rage bait. Maybe, yeah, it got me raging a little bit. This was the other tweet that I had is wait, where would it go? Oh, this is how I felt. If Daron Acemoglu isn't hot, isn't like a quality economist, then who is? Who is? No, if Daron Acemoglu isn't good enough, then nobody is, because he's the most cited and he has a Nobel Prize. So go attack somebody else. Yeah. All right. Let's. I'm moving on to a different topic. Is YIMBY Law soft launched that they are going to be going after the constitutionality of zoning, and it's something that I've been hoping for. I took a constitutional law class when I was an undergrad. Everything goes back to what I took when I was an undergrad, which I liked a lot. And I've always been thinking hey, this zoning stuff, local zoning, local control of zoning, how is that even constitutional? How come no one's gone after that? And I'm not the first one to think of this. The Cato Institute, which is a right-leaning think tank, they also think that exclusionary zoning is unconstitutional. This article was originally in The Atlantic, so another reputable place coming out and saying this. And basically their main argument is that, where was it? Okay. A crucial tool may lie in the Constitution, the takings clause of the Fifth Amendment. The clause requires that when the government takes private property, it must pay just compensation. Okay, so I own a home. I have a large front yard that I would love to build an ADU on, but I am not able to build that ADU because my local government says no go. That could be considered a taking. It's my land. I own it. If you're going to take my ability to build on my own land that I own away, isn't that takings? And it shouldn't matter, at least in my mind, I'm not a legal expert, that the taking is like the status quo. So, these authors argued this in the Texas Law Review article. And there's a lot of things coming into question in terms of their constitutionality, right? And I think that zoning is one thing that I would like to see questioned, whether that's constitutional or not. It was ruled that racially discriminatory zoning is unconstitutional under equal protection. Modern day zoning, single family zoning, is in a lot of ways a replication of racial segregation zoning. So there's also that way to argue. There's the libertarian, you can't tell me what to do on my land argument, which I also am very sympathetic to. And there's the, hey, this is discriminatory, you can't do this argument. So people on the left and the right, this is why YIMBYism cuts across multiple or both spectrums of the both sides of the political spectrum. Because if you right-leaning libertarian, you should be mad about single-family zoning. If you're a left-leaning equality person, you should also care about single-family zoning, and neither of you should like it. And we'll see how far YIMBY law gets, but I think that we should be having this debate. We have just accepted that this is a no-go for so long, and why? 2026 redlining says, I really want to know podcast. I agree. Okay. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, speaking of, I don't know if I'm speaking of anything. Speaking of land, let's say speaking of land. I'm always speaking of land. Progress and Poverty Substack, they put out this article about how low property taxes are freezing young people out of the economy. And I fully agree with this. They even cite some Redfin research that I'm quoted in about how baby boomers own an outsized portion of large homes that would be more suitable for young families. And one of the reasons that older generations are staying in their homes longer, I talked last week about capital gains tax. Another reason is that they don't pay enough property tax to motivate them to sell their homes. If you own a 3-bedroom home in California, but you're paying taxes like it's a 1-bedroom home, there's nothing motivating you to give up that 3-bedroom home to move into the 1-bedroom home. And because of Prop 13, baby boomers do have these tax rates that are way below the market value of their homes. And this research and this paper, this article is citing research that validates that. Let me scroll down. Low property taxes raise the selling price of housing. This is because it restricts the supply, right? People have no reason to sell, so they don't sell. Less homes for sale means higher prices. Another reason is that, well, actually, these are two of the same things. I just said the second thing. I guess these are two ways to say the same thing. But low property taxes decrease the cost of holding on to housing. Yes, so it restricts the supply in that way. It also raises the selling price of housing. Maybe this is one is a consequence of two, is how I would think about it. But when property taxes are high, more people sell their homes, prices drop. People still have to pay those property taxes over the life of the home when they go to buy, but the upfront cost of owning that home is lower because of the way that the value of the home or like the payment on the home is put into the future. So if we wanted to get more young people owning homes in this country, like property taxes are a tool to do that. And these age regressive property tax structures that we have in most states, like in most states, the older you are, the less property tax you pay. In California, you have Prop 13 doing that, but in other states, they have similar things. Like they have senior discounts for property taxes. I know in Wisconsin, they have that for low-income seniors. And yes, we should care about low-income seniors, but we should be caring about them in ways that are not distortionary to the housing market. Like if you want low-income seniors to have more money, just give them the money. Don't go distorting the housing market over it. All right, what else is going on? Oh yeah, I promised I would talk about AI. Let me pop over and see. Okay. Yeah, so Dr. April in the chat brought up that the San Francisco Bay Area rental market, housing market is going nuts. We identified this in the data like back in May, I want to say. I have a YouTube video about it if you are interested called I forget what it's called, AI Housing Bubble San Francisco. You can look at my page. Go to my YouTube. Subscribe to my YouTube. Oh, that reminds me. Subscribe, like, share. Just take a second. Hit the like button. Did you do it? Like. Tap. Okay. Yeah, go check out my YouTube because I have a whole YouTube video explaining this. But there's all this AI wealth that is being created right now. And because San Francisco has a very limited housing supply, the wealth ends up directly in home prices because people end up wanting to get bigger, better homes. They bid on these homes, they overbid on these homes, the prices go up. As prices go up, people get priced out. And then it starts spreading all over the San Francisco housing market and the Bay Area. So this is happening right now. It's been happening. But what I am starting to wonder about is like this AI bubble and what happens if the AI bubble were to burst. What happens to the San Francisco housing market then? Okay, so why am I more worried? I mean, the AI bubble has always been an issue, but why am I more worried now? Because there was this talent exodus at OpenAI where a bunch of executives all at the same time quit. And that is not a good sign for a company that is planning on going public to have this much turnover. Like it makes you wonder, what do they know? Was there a meeting where they saw some internal documents, figures, projections where they realized, oh, I need to get out of here. I need to start looking for my next job, or I don't want to be here when it's the fan. Did that happen? I wasn't there. I don't know. But, these are the things that we are left to wonder about when multiple executives leave a company all at once. And maybe this is just OpenAI and realizing that they're losing to Anthropic, which is like existential for them, but maybe it's not existential to all of AI. Maybe more AI wealth will be created. If it's just OpenAI that ends up being the loser, then, I think the economy is going to just keep on growing. If Anthropic becomes number one and OpenAI falls, that's not an issue for the macro economy because the technology is still being deployed. It's still having the same productivity boosts. It might impact the San Francisco housing market because a lot of people who thought that they were getting rich off of OpenAI now might be realizing that they're not getting rich off of it, and they might stop overbidding on all of these homes. But presumably they would be replaced by other people who are the winners in this AI economy, and the AI economy in general is concentrated in the Bay Area. So I don't think that this necessarily means the entire AI bubble is bursting, but something ain't right at OpenAI, which is suspicious, and we don't have all the details. So we don't know if it's just an OpenAI problem, which it probably is, or if it's something more fundamental to AI and technology and the economy broader. But I know all these companies are co-invested in one another, right? So if one goes under, like how big of a deal, how much will it spread? Is there a contagion effect there? It's possible. But yeah, again, yellow signs, not necessarily red just yet. And a housing market that has not been benefiting from AI, that has the largest fall from grace in the country, is Seattle. I've been doing a couple interviews lately about Seattle's housing market, also on YouTube, because pending home sales are plunging, prices are down, and it seems like the main culprit is the economy. I mean, that's like everything, right? So of course it's the economy. Seattle's local economy during the 2010s, which was when I was living there, and I lived there from 2016 to 2020, it was just fueled by tech hiring. Tech hiring was bringing people to Seattle. These people were coming with high-paying salaries. It was growing the population in Seattle, and it was increasing the incomes of people living in Seattle. When I was at Amazon, the employee population, both locally in Seattle and globally, was doubling every single year. There were 30,000. It went from like 30,000 to 60,000, if I'm remembering this correctly. Between 2016 and 2017, like the years that I was working there. So that many people coming just to one city, and they're paying them to come. It was fueling a lot of demand for real estate. It was accelerating the rents. It was accelerating the housing market. And in 2020, that all stopped. That's when I left Seattle and started working remotely, and other people did this. It started to stagnate for a couple of years, and now it's starting to look even weaker. And I think the reason, remote work is something that could have been recovered from. They had returned to office with Amazon and all these companies in Seattle, and there was like a push to kind of revitalize the downtown or South Lake Union of Seattle to get the economy going again. But then Amazon stopped hiring. AI is now at least partially responsible for the slowdown in hiring, along with higher interest rates. But like the tech sector of Seattle is very 2010s. It's not 2020s in terms of its strength. It's 2000 and late, as the Black Eyed Peas would say. I don't even know if that makes sense. So it's showing up in the Seattle housing market. And some people, I noticed in the comments for this one YouTube of the interview I did, were saying like, it's the millionaire tax. It's the millionaire tax. It's not the millionaire tax. Seattle is in the midst of passing income taxes on the wealthy, or wealth taxes, I think. But if you look at luxury in Seattle, luxury prices are stronger than the rest of the market. Luxury prices up 3.6%, non-luxury down 0.6%. This is a bit lagged because this is quarterly data. Oops, it related. Let me type that in. This is our data center, by the way. See, Redfin News data center. If you ever need housing data, go check it out. You can peruse it on your time. You can even download it and upload it to Claude or whatever and do fun analyses. But what I wanted to show was that new listings of homes for luxury. How can I scroll over? Can I get this on the screen? Anyway, what I wanted to show is that luxury listings are not spiking. If anything, the increase is coming from non-luxury. So this millionaire tax is not causing people to leave Seattle. That is not what's going on. At least it's not showing up in a large enough way for me to see it in the aggregate housing data. On aggregate, it's the middle of the market that is the weakest. So that's not the explanation. Kialio over on YouTube says, I think AI only companies will have the same issue that Netscape had. Netscape had the best browser, but Microsoft won with Internet Explorer because it had other revenue streams. Yeah, so from what I understand, the reason that Anthropic is winning the AI race right now is because they focused on enterprise solutions, meaning business to business, B2B, and OpenAI focused on B2C, direct to consumer. And it seems like consumers, like everyday people, they don't like AI. It's not cool to like AI. But in a business setting, you're being encouraged to use AI because your managers, your leaders are seeing AI as this productivity tool in this way to like get the entire company more efficient and on the same page about stuff. So I think socially, B2B is the winner. Like the people who are enthusiastic about AI are the business customers. The consumers, the everyday people, there's not as big of a customer pool there as OpenAI was probably thinking, because they weren't taking into account this AI backlash that's happening, that it's just not seen as a moral or cool thing to use AI. But it's weird because I feel like even people who are very anti-AI will use AI in specific instances, or will give people a pass in specific instances. Like I use Claude Cowork or Claude Code all the time nowadays for creating Python code and SQL queries. But I don't think anybody thinks that's not desirable. It's more socially acceptable to use AI for writing code than it is to use AI for creating something that an artist could have created. I think that's like social reasons for that are for a sociologist to really get into. Not me. These are just my observations. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah, I wanted to share the worst headline of the week. I think I might make this a series. Worst headline of the week. This is from the Daily Mail. So, Daily Mail is going to Daily Mail. And they said, in a grim sign for the economy, home sales dropped to their lowest point in years, and a woke West Coast town is leading the decline. I just explained to you why Seattle is the weakest housing market in the country. And it has nothing to do with it being woke. Like, what is this headline? This is nonsense. What is going on? And they cite Redfin, so thank you to Daily Mail for linking to Redfin and citing. But this is like an Onion headline, right? The Onion could have wrote this. It's just so funny to me. So worst headline, funniest headline. I gotta think of like a name for this series. An award. You get the worst headline award or the most nonsense headline. Let me know in the chat how I should brand this. Make it a regular series. Okay, well, I am done talking about everything I wanted to talk about. Thank you for coming to my live stream. Before you leave, please please subscribe. Whatever platform you're on, go follow me on another platform. If you're on TikTok, follow me on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, follow me on Instagram. Mix it up so I can be ever present in your life. Okay. Thanks for coming. Again, I'm Daryl Fairweather. I'm Redfin's chief economist. I'm also the author of Hate the Game, Economic Cheat Codes for Life, Love, and Work. It's a book about how to use economics to live a better life. It's endorsed by Stephen Levitt, co-author of Freakonomics. He called it fabulous. Angela Yee, former host of the Breakfast Club and host of Way Up. Roger Myerson, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics. And Kerwin Charles, the dean of the Yale School of Management. So all of these people endorsed my book. And you think you're better than them? You have better taste than them? No, listen to them. Get it. It's available on audiobook too. So go check that out.